Glad that you're able to join us again this week. I put out a call in our social group as well. So I hope there's some people that join us to learn tonight about squaring up and basically how to fix your mistakes. I said the very first week that uh, perfect piecing starts with perfect cutting. And the reality is that that's not always going to be possible. I don't know about, and let me know, Joyce and anyone else that joins us. Um, I did something terribly wrong, and some of my blocks were like significantly off compared to others. You'll always get a little bit of variation in your block size, especially depending if you're ironing with steam. It changes and can warp your blocks a little bit, depending on the pressure that you're applying. So you're going to have a little bit of variation, and squaring your blocks up allows you to have a nice even quilt. As I've said before, the nice thing about this particular quilt pattern is that there are no seams that need to match up. It's more important that your blocks are square when you have a quilt with seams that do need to match. Because this one doesn't, it's not as essential and it's not going to look off, for example. So I've got my stack of sweaters here. I spent the weekend laying them out. I'll drop a picture in the Facebook event afterwards so people can see. And I spent about half an hour trying to play with the balance of colors and where I wanted a sweater with like a light background like this one versus a darker background. I've numbered them all in the bottom in the seam allowance with an erasable pencil. And one of the tricks you can do when you're doing that, you really do need space to do that. I laid everything out on the floor. And once you've taken a picture, you can turn it to grayscale to see if there's any spots that are, significantly brighter or significantly darker. If you've got two, bright spots next to each other, maybe you want to break those up. So that's a little trick about that. Now, I went through and measured all my blocks. I have a feeling, and I looked in the pattern and I didn't see anything about what the size of final blocks are supposed to be. I think they're probably supposed to be 11 by 18. Mine are not. Mine are 11 by 17 and 3/4, sort of consistently throughout. But I do have ones where, like this one, you can see is not square and not even. So I'm going to show you what to do and how to square those up. And I'll do a couple of examples, and then we're going to put this together. What is going to be helpful, I don't have a large enough square ruler. Mine is only 12.5 by 12.5. We do at the store have a 20.5-inch ruler. That's what you would need for this. Whenever you are squaring up a block, you want to use a ruler that's roughly the same size as what the final dimensions of your block are. It's going to be easier to work with. So if you need a, 6.5-inch block, use a 6.5-inch ruler. If you're limited on space and can only invest in a couple of quilt rulers, I would suggest that having the 12.5-inch, like a 5.5-inch, and like a 7 or 8.5-inch are probably what you want to invest in. And it also really depends on what you're like. If you're only ever going to sew jelly roll quilts and not square anything up, then you don't need that kind of ruler. So I'm going to use, I've got my cutting mat here and my 24 by 6-inch, and I'm just going to measure on the cutting mat. So we're going to start with, and I went through and measured all of mine already. That's something that you should do as well. So come down here. So I'm going to line this up And this is actually, I might actually stand for this. It's significantly easier if you're standing. I would usually do this on my larger cutting table that's at my standing height, but obviously for the sake of doing this, we're going to not do it like that. I'm going to line up the top, and I want to trim from the bottom because the top is so narrow. Losing from the bottom is going to be less of an issue. Actually, what I'm going to do is line it up here. And there we go. So I want this to be 11 by 17 and 3/4. So I'm going to trim from the bottom because there's more space for me to take away from. Most patterns will tell you what to trim your blocks to, and a lot of patterns do have they've created a block where it's when you're sewing it, it's actually bigger than what you are sewing, and then you trim it down. I think it's week 2 or 3 of the Cope Away Quilt Along, we talk about that if you want to go back and reference that. So this one is pretty good. You can see I've just got a very little bit here that I'm going to trim away. And honestly, when you're doing this, sometimes you're going to be trimming, you can see like almost nothing, but just to make it perfectly square. And same on this side. And taking the time to do this is what's going to give you your best results. And you can see I've trimmed off just the blue part from that side and not anything from that little green bit. So there's my first one. I'm going to do the second one again. I'm going to do the first 3 because we're going to piece that part of the quilt next. So again, I'm going to line this up on my mat. And there we go. And this one you can see is like, let me get the ruler in place. You can see how much of the overhang I have here. I really don't know what I did. I cut something very wrong. But as you can see, it's not dire. It's not the end of the world. It's very, very fixable. You don't need to, re-sew your whole block. I'm going to trim the top of this just a little bit too. I don't suggest trimming too much from the top because of how narrow it is. And same here again. And you can see, again, I'm trimming like almost nothing. But just that little bit. Oh, and this has shifted. If you can trim with a ruler instead of using the lines on the cutting mat, it is better. It is less likely to shift, and you're able to get more accuracy. But I just don't have a ruler large enough to do that. So there is block number 3. And then finally, that was block 2. We'll do block 3 here. Oh. And you can see this one is like almost at 18 inches. So my blocks ended up being significantly larger in some parts and significantly smaller in others. And I don't know why, but that's okay. Any questions about this so far? Let me know. Let me know if you ran into those same problems, those same issues when sewing this. Let me know how your sewing is going. And we're going to see, I have a feeling that this might affect how we finally put things together. I'm going to take a second and move this cutting mat because I'm going to switch to the iron so that we can demonstrate putting together these little blocks. There is this, my lovely little Oliso. It heats up so fast. I'm really loving this little powerhouse of an iron. I'll take it out of its case and it is off, so we're going to turn it on. Okay, and this, I might not be able to do this fully the way I want to right now because I may need more space. So we're going to put the quilt together now, and it's the same kind of piecing like we did before. So you've got rows of 3 and rows of 2, and you've got those other little pieces that measure, and it's got all the measurements on here, 11 1/4 by 1 3/4, and then the larger blocks on the other side. How to piece this? You're going to have to piece it in rows and then piece the rows together. I would suggest to keep it from shifting too much. You're going to piece the first row to the second row. Well, you'll piece, I'm jumping ahead of myself. You would piece this piece to this piece and this piece to this piece, and then that becomes one block and that becomes one block, and then you piece those together and then you piece that final piece onto it. And once you've got these rows together, you'll piece A to B, C to D, then A, B to C, D. Instead of building it by piecing A to B, C to B, D to B, what that allows you to do is it keeps it from really like shifting, distorting as you're going through things. Hang on one second. I've got background noise going on and I'm just going to turn that off. Beautiful. And then once that all is finally done, you're going to piece your outside strips and then attach those. I haven't cut mine yet because I have not enough fabric. These are they're 4 inches in width, and they're meant to be a border around this. You could absolutely finish this quilt without that border. It will mean that your binding is going to eat into your little sweaters. I'm going to make mine smaller than 4.5 inches. There's nothing that says that you have to do it at 4.5 inches. But what you would do is sew those strips together, and then you would sew, I think you sew the sides and then the bottoms. Should place, does it say anything? Piece to top and bottom. Yes, so you piece your top, your top and your bottom first, and then your sides. Anyways, so, and I've lost my other pieces. There they are. So I need 2 of these strips, and this is hopefully fairly straightforward for everyone. Here is my machine. We're going to go here so you can see what I'm doing. I've got my 1/4 inch foot. We're still using that 1/4 inch foot. So this is number 3 that I've cut off. So I'm actually going to piece this to number 3 because it's here first. And Yeah, so these are supposed to be, so my finished blocks are supposed to be an 11 1/4 inch. And how do I know that? Because this piece is 11 1/4 inches. So what you can do is actually just cut these pieces to 11 inches. What that's going to impact as well is the other blocks. You'll cut those to 11 inches or whatever your final quilt measurement is. If your quilt block is 10 1/2 inches, cut them 10 1/2 inches tall. It is not the end of the world. I am just going to trim these real quick to save me from having to trim them later when they're attached to the block. And, you know, that's sort of basically what I'm getting at with, you know, there is no wrong answer. The whatever is sort of the key is consistency across your blocks. It doesn't have to match the final measurements of what the pattern says. It does have to be the same for every block. And that's where something is vibrating here. That's where squaring up makes a difference. Oh, and I've got a lot of garbage on the floor. That's okay. And somehow this is still too long. I don't know what I did. Oh, it's okay. You will absolutely have to trim at the end of all of this again. Somehow still too tall. Who knows? Who knows what I'm doing? I don't know what I'm doing. Make sure this is 3. This is 2, so it's going on this side. Make sure you sew your strips to the correct sides. And I should have, I wanted to show everybody, you can absolutely continue chain piecing through this part of your quilt. If you don't have a rotary cutter and mat, you would need to mark on your blocks and then cut by hand to square them up. So here, I'm going to iron my seams. And again, it doesn't make a difference what direction you iron them in because none of them are going to line up with each other. I'm going to iron them away from that white part. Same thing with this guy. I'm going to iron it towards this piece. And I will have to go back and trim. But for now, and then you piece those 2 pieces together, and then you get your strip. And then you keep going until you've got a whole quilt top. And I'm going to make sure that my bottoms match for this because I will have to square them up again. And I guess it can also be said that at the end of the day, if you are unhappy with your quilt block, if it's just fabric, you can always find some more and go make a new one. Yeah, okay, this is very short. This guy, I don't know what it did. It is okay. I really don't know what I did. Look at it. I did something, I tell you. And then finally, this. Ta-da! Let me see if I can adjust this. I'm not going to do any more sewing tonight because, so there's your first row. And then you just keep piecing those together, following that diagram in the layout. So by next week, you should have your quilt top together. We are going to next week. Sorry, let's fix this here. Ooh, boo, 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 boo. There we go. Next week, we are going, it's doing that thing where it slides. Next week, we are going to talk about how to finish the quilt, how to make your quilt sandwich, how to decide on what you want to quilt, how to do that quilting, and then binding. Next week will be a little bit of a longer video because those are more topics to cover. But we're not going to be doing it on our quilt top because it just takes too long. Usually to quilt out a quilt top, depending on the complexity of the quilting, you're looking at, I know for me, anywhere between a total of 3 to 8 hours. So it's a big, for a throw size quilt, it's a big job. So we'll make sure that you have next week some samples we're going to practice on. And then that is it. Thank you so much, Joyce. It's just been you and me, but I hope you're enjoying your quilt. Get that quilt top together. And if the idea of quilting it is super daunting to you, don't worry about it because I will also share some resources to be able to send it out and have it long armed. So have someone else do the quilting for you. Awesome. All right. Have a great week. I guess happy Halloween next Monday, even though we're sewing Christmas quilts. And we'll see you next Thursday. Bye.